Mohammed Kudus' transfer to Tottenham Hotspur might be the biggest mistake he's ever made in his football career. Let me tell you why. So we recently just found out that Mohammed Kudus has made the move to the north of London, Tottenham Hotspur, and I think it might not have been the best decision, partly as a bitter Chelsea fan, as you can see, but also because I think they were much better clubs he could have made the transfer to. Obviously, the opinion is divided. I think a lot of people, including Kudus himself, see a lot of merit in making that switch to Tottenham Hotspur, and I'm going to break all of those reasons down before I get into the reasons that I think are detrimental to his career as a whole. Let's get straight into it. The first reason people are so excited about this move, including Kudus himself, I'm looking purely from the footballing aspect and why Kudus would have looked at Spurs as an ideal next destination, is Champions League football. Obviously, the player wants to play and deserves to play, in my opinion, at the top level of football, European football that is, and he's not been able to do that at West Ham United. I always said, and I maintain when he made the move to West Ham, that I thought it was a bit of a step down, a regression in a sense, but I think Kudus has always been keen on progressing his career gradually, and I think that, you know, making a move to West Ham, he viewed at the time would be a step back to make that step forward. It never really panned out that way, because if you remember, West Ham were off the back of a Conference League win. They looked really exciting playing in the Europa League. I think Kudus might have thought West Ham could potentially win the Europa League or break into that top 4, top 5 spots in the Premier League and make that next step to Champions League. But I think last season, with the regression that West Ham made, finishing I think 13th or 14th, it may have lit the alarm bells in Kudus' mind that perhaps he needs to make the move to another club to guarantee Champions League football. And I think Spurs offered him one of the best avenues to play at Europe's top table. Another reason why Kudus made the move to Spurs, and I think it's the most important reason why he made that move as opposed to the other big clubs that were in for you. Because remember, the likes of Chelsea were really interested in signing Kudus and were offered the chance to sign Kudus. The likes of Arsenal, the likes of Liverpool were all monitoring him. But I think he chose Spurs because he wanted the path of least resistance to first team football, consistent first team football. You look at the likes of Chelsea with the amount of winger options they have right now. The fact that Noni Madueke is leaving because he's not guaranteed first team football. Sterling is still on the books at Chelsea. Pedro Neto, Joao Pedro, Jackson can play on the wings. Tyreek George can play on the wings. You're looking at Cole Palmer right now, drifting onto the left wing as well. And I think he sees that as more of a challenge to him breaking into the first team. Same with Arsenal. Saka, Martinelli, Madueke coming in now. They have Trossard as well. They have Nwaneri that can play on the wings. I think he views it as a very tough place to break into that first team. Liverpool, even worse. Salah is unmovable. Luis Diaz probably also difficult to shift out of that position. Wirtz in the 10. You are not going to displace Florian Wirtz as the out-and-out number 10. So I think looking at Spurs, Kulusevski, Brennan Johnson, potentially Son if he's still there. I think it's a more straightforward path into the first team. I think he's much better than Brennan Johnson. I think he's much better than Kulusevski. And Son, who knows if he's going to start week in, week out. So those are the reasons that, in my opinion, I think Kudus would have looked at this team and made this move. The reason why I don't agree with this being a good move for him is because invariably, Tottenham are regressing. Tottenham feel like West Ham of a couple of seasons ago. Yes, they may have made it into the Champions League, but you look at the table, and in actuality, Tottenham were a worse side than West Ham United last season, and West Ham had a poor season by all accounts. And so for Tottenham Hotspur, whose personnel remain like majorly unchanged, a lot of the players who were to blame for the conflicts and for the the troubles of last season are still in that side, and so joining a team who don't look to be on the way up but are on the way down could potentially be a bad move and something that could essentially manifest itself into another West Ham United debacle, where okay, this season they have a bit of a good one with the new manager Thomas Frank. They are battling to get into that 6th, 7th position in the Premier League. They go to the Champions League. Okay, they play a bit of Champions League football. Whether they go far or not, that is also something for debate. And then they fall out, and then it goes back to the same old Tottenham Hotspur where now they have another poor season. I think it's a real gamble in terms of the place you're going to progress yourself and progress your career. Yeah, it would have been difficult to break into the likes of Chelsea, break into the likes of Arsenal, break into the likes of Liverpool. But if you had managed to do that, right, you are guaranteed a team that is consistently playing at the top level. You are challenging yourself week in and week out. You are trying to improve as well as a player so that you can compete with these guys, and playing against them in training, learning from them can only elevate your game. So going to a team like Tottenham seems like a bit of a safe bet, but ultimately you look at the careers that players like Son have had, and you look at the careers that players like Harry Kane had up until the point he made the switch to Bayern Munich, and you realize that okay, sometimes playing it safe isn't necessarily the best thing for your career. A player who wants to win trophies at a consistent level. I mean, West Ham probably have more trophies in the last decade than Tottenham Hotspurs have. That is an absolute mind-blowing statistic. So yeah, from that perspective, it almost feels like a regression. Also, let's not forget, this is the exact same team that he went into blows with last season, right? There's already a bit of bad blood between himself and the Spurs squad, and that same squad is still there right now. I know it's just competition and I know it's just football, but it kind of leaves a bit of a bad taste in the mouth of the Spurs supporters for one, the Spurs players for another. I mean, sometimes in training you can have a bit of a tough tackle, you can have a bit of a coming together. We've seen it in other teams where players clash on the training ground, and if there's already a bit of tension between yourself and the playing body, it could only really escalate, right? And when that happened with the game against Spurs, I mean, Arsenal fans were licking their lips. Like, this is a guy who has, stood up to these Spurs players. He could have been a cult hero at Tottenham Hotspur. He could have been a cult hero at Arsenal if he had made that switch. But ultimately, going to Spurs, if one or two things happen, I can foresee a situation where he is just generally very quickly put under the cosh, in that setting. I also maintain that if you had your pick of clubs like across Europe, and that's the quality of player Kudus is, right? He had the likes of Chelsea coming in for him. He had the likes of Arsenal coming for him. He had the likes of Liverpool coming for him. He could have even moved abroad, not necessarily staying in the Premier League. He could have signed for a team like, I don't know, off the top of my head, maybe a Villarreal, for example. Even a Atletico Madrid, maybe not, because the playing style is a bit difficult. Maybe let's move to Germany, for example, a Bayer Leverkusen, a Bayern Munich, a Borussia Dortmund. Like, I think there are places that could have guaranteed him this, first team football. Maybe not as easy to break into the first team, but admittedly, like any player who wants to be one of the best players in the world is going to have to compete for some of these positions. I mean, you look at other players, for example, I'm trying to think of other Ghanaian players, maybe a Thomas Partey, who right now is a very unpopular player to talk about, but regardless, he went into that Arsenal team and he had to fight for his place. There were times where he was played out of position. There were times where he wasn't starting in the middle of the pack. Players with bigger pedigree like Jorginho, like Declan Rice, like Mikel Merino, like Zubimendi were getting signed, and yet Thomas Partey remained, and he remained one of the best players in the league. So again, if you want to be a top player, you're going to have to compete with other players in your position to prove that you're one of the best. And I think Kudus is one of the best players in the league, right? Kudus has, the dribbling stats on lock. He has, the goal catalogue. He's very good positionally. He's strong. He's fast. He's skillful. I think he could have competed at Chelsea. I think he could have competed at Liverpool, probably even Arsenal, because Arsenal, that left wing spot is up for grabs. And I know, maybe Kudus not necessarily does not want to play in that left wing position. We know his favorite positions are the 10 role. We know he likes to play on the right, drifting in on his left foot. But again, you want to make it as a top footballer, you're going to have to play under some of the best managers and adapt your game, to ensure that you are in and around. I remember Victor Moses having to switch to a right back, essentially, or a right wing back, in order to play for Chelsea, and had so much success in that Chelsea side. And so it's always going to be tough, man. It's always going to be tough. But yeah, in my opinion, this feels like a bit of a cop-out. It feels like a bit of a cop-out because Spurs were not great last season. I liken it to a player signing for Man United right now, and a lot of players are really rethinking the decision to sign for United because it kind of kills careers. And I think Spurs, to some extent, are kind of killing careers. I know this could prove to be utter rubbish, I'm talking, and he could end up, being an absolute star and carrying Spurs to, third position or fourth position. But a player like Kudus should be competing in those teams for those titles year in, year out. Imagine Kudus' career ends and he's never won a major trophy in any of the top leagues, right? He's never even competed. I think that would be an absolute shame. And I think this next move, especially at his age, is probably the defining move. And moving from West Ham to a team that were not as good, like, let's be very honest, they were 17th. Yeah, they were 17th last season. Like, if not for 3 worst teams in the league, Spurs would have been relegated. And you are signing for them just off the back of them securing Champions League football is an absolute piss take, guys. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think it's a good move for Kudus, or do you think it's an awful move? Again, I say awful in like a very hyperbolic sense, right? I mean, who am I to judge Kudus' career? But just on the scale of, absolute blinders, like, signing for Chelsea. Obviously, I think signing for Chelsea is the best thing ever because I'm a Chelsea fan. But yeah, just ranking those moves in those contexts as well. Let me know where you think it ranks. How good of a move do you think it is from 1 to 10, ladies and gentlemen? And if you enjoyed today's video and you enjoyed what I have to say and you agree with me, please consider leaving a like on today's video, subscribing to the channel Oyibo Sports, and as always, guys, I go see you for streets.